Everyone thinks the Middle East is being shaped by missiles, airstrikes, and American power. But what if I told you the real puppet master isn't Washington, or even Tehran? It's Beijing quietly pulling strings from thousands of miles away. When the world looks at the Middle East today, the headlines focus on the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran. Airstrikes, covert operations, missile tests. These dominate the news cycle. Yet beneath the surface, there is another story that very few are paying attention to. China, a nation thousands of miles away, is positioning itself as a quiet mediator in this conflict. While Washington's presence is obvious, Beijing's role is far more subtle, but equally significant. This is not the story of armies or missiles. It is the story of diplomacy, influence, and strategy. It is about how China seeks to balance stability in one of the most volatile regions in the world while protecting its own interests. And it is about how Beijing is navigating a delicate line, presenting itself as a neutral peacemaker, even as it maintains deep, long-standing ties with Iran. Few YouTube videos have dug into this, yet it may be one of the most important developments shaping the future of the Middle East. China's broader Middle East strategy. You've been told the Middle East belongs to Washington, but the biggest power shift in decades is happening right now under everyone's noses. China isn't sending soldiers, it's sending diplomats, and that's far scarier. To understand China's current actions, we need to see the bigger picture. For decades, the Middle East has been viewed as a sphere of American influence. The United States built military bases, brokered peace deals, and controlled energy flows. But in recent years, Washington's attention has shifted. Wars in Iraq and Afghanistan drained political will, and now the focus has turned toward competition with China in Asia. Into that space, Beijing has stepped carefully. China's main interest in the region has always been energy. It is the world's largest importer of oil, and countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq supply a significant share of it. Stability in the Middle East is not just a diplomatic preference for China. It is an economic necessity. But as China has grown, so too has its ambition. It no longer wants to be only a customer. It wants to be a shaper of outcomes. That is why it has begun to act not just as a buyer of oil, but as a broker of peace. The balancing act with Iran. While the world watches missiles fly between Israel and Iran, the real story is happening in silence. China is quietly turning the Middle East into its playground. And if you miss this, you'll miss the single biggest shift in global power this decade. Iran is central to this story. China and Iran have shared ties for decades. Beijing has invested billions in Iranian oil fields, infrastructure projects, and trade agreements. The two countries signed a 25-year strategic cooperation pact that covers everything from energy to defense. For Iran, isolated by Western sanctions, China is a lifeline. But this partnership comes with challenges. Supporting Iran too openly risks damaging China's relationships with other key players in the region, especially Israel and Saudi Arabia. Both of those countries also matter deeply to Beijing. Saudi Arabia is a top oil supplier and a critical partner in the Belt and Road Initiative. Israel, meanwhile, is a hub of technology and innovation that China hopes to tap into. This means China must walk a fine line. It cannot abandon Iran, but it also cannot alienate Israel or Saudi Arabia. The solution Beijing has chosen is diplomacy, offering itself as a neutral mediator that speaks to all sides while quietly protecting its own economic interests. The role of mediator. What's more powerful in the Middle East today, a missile or a handshake? The answer will shock you, because while everyone is focused on war, China is winning through diplomacy. In March 2023, China brokered a historic agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, restoring diplomatic ties after years of hostility. That move shocked many observers. For decades, it was Washington that mediated such deals. Yet this time, it was Beijing's diplomats who brought the parties together. This success has emboldened China to try more. In the case of rising tensions between Israel and Iran, Beijing has signaled that it is willing to use its influence to reduce escalation. Chinese officials have spoken about dialogue, de-escalation, and peaceful resolution. The language is careful, but the message is clear. China wants to be seen as the responsible power, the calm hand in a region of volatility. But make no mistake, this is not purely altruism. Every missile launched in the Middle East threatens China's energy supply lines. Every escalation risks higher oil prices, which hurt China's economy. Mediation is not just about peace. It is about protecting Chinese interests. How Israel views China. Israel has a complicated relationship with Beijing. On one hand, Israel values its deep security partnership with the United States, and Washington remains its primary ally. On the other hand, Israel also sees opportunity in working with China, especially in technology and trade. But Israel also knows that China is close to Iran, the very country threatening its security. That makes trust difficult. Israeli leaders listen carefully when Beijing offers to mediate, but they remain cautious. They ask, can China truly be neutral when it has such strong economic ties to Iran? For now, Israel does not reject Chinese involvement outright, but it treats it as secondary. The United States is still the main partner, while China is watched with careful interest. How Iran views China. For Iran, China is more than a partner. It is a survival channel. As Western sanctions cut Tehran off from global markets, China has continued to buy Iranian oil, often through indirect or hidden mechanisms. Beijing provides investment, technology, and political cover in international forums. When China positions itself as a mediator, Iran welcomes the move. It sees Beijing as a counterbalance to Washington, while Iran knows that China will not give it everything. The very act of standing on the global stage with Beijing gives Tehran legitimacy. This is why Iran plays along with China's diplomatic efforts. It strengthens the narrative that the world is no longer unipolar. It is not just Washington and Brussels that matter. Beijing matters too. The United States and the shift in power. America is watching all of this with concern. For decades, the Middle East was the core of American foreign policy. Now China is showing it can step into roles that Washington once owned. The United States still maintains overwhelming military superiority in the region, but military power is not the same as diplomatic influence. China is proving that it can use trade, investment, and mediation to win friends in places where America is losing patience. For Washington, the fear is not that Beijing will replace it overnight, but that over time, countries in the Middle East will start to see China as the partner that delivers stability while the United States is distracted elsewhere. The risk of overstretch. Of course, China faces risks too. The Middle East is famously complex. Alliances shift, conflicts ignite, and mediation efforts often collapse. If Beijing overcommits, it could be drawn into disputes it does not fully understand. Unlike the United States, China does not have a history of military intervention in the region. Its leverage is mostly economic. That gives it influence, but also limits its ability to enforce agreements. There is also the danger that being too close to Iran could harm China's standing with Arab states or Israel. Already, some Gulf countries worry that Beijing is tilting too far toward Tehran. Managing these perceptions is one of the hardest tasks for Chinese diplomacy. The quiet strategy. Headlines scream about Israel and Iran on the brink of war. But there's a hidden player almost nobody is watching: China. And its moves in the Middle East are far more dangerous and far more permanent than any missile launch. What makes China's role so fascinating is how quiet it is. Beijing does not broadcast its moves loudly. It does not hold flashy summits or issue dramatic threats. Instead, it works behind the scenes, through trade agreements, discreet meetings, and carefully worded statements. This quietness is strategic. China does not want to be seen as replacing the United States militarily. It wants to be seen as offering something different: calm, steady, economic-focused diplomacy. By keeping its tone measured, Beijing gains credibility as the adult in the room, while others escalate tensions. Why YouTube is not covering this? So why is this story not getting major coverage on YouTube? Partly because it is subtle. Dramatic events like bombings or protests grab attention, but quiet diplomacy does not. Partly because much of the Western media still frames the Middle East through Washington's perspective, underestimating China's growing role. But make no mistake, these moves matter. The restoration of Saudi-Iran ties proved that China can deliver. Its positioning in the Israel-Iran conflict shows it intends to try again. And every step strengthens its claim to being a global power that can shape peace as well as trade. What comes next? Several scenarios are possible. If tensions between Israel and Iran escalate further, China will likely increase its calls for dialogue, perhaps even offering to host talks. Whether those talks succeed or not, the very act of hosting them will enhance Beijing's reputation. If a limited conflict breaks out, China will push for rapid de-escalation. It will not intervene militarily, but it may use its economic ties to pressure Iran while urging restraint on Israel. If peace talks do gain traction, Beijing will claim a share of the credit. It will present itself as a responsible global leader, contrasting itself with Washington's image as a military power. What's more dangerous to America's dominance? A missile test in Iran or China's quiet handshake in Tehran? The answer could reshape the Middle East forever. China's hidden hand in the Middle East is shaping the future in ways that are not obvious but are deeply important. By balancing ties with Iran, engaging with Israel, and presenting itself as a mediator, Beijing is creating a new role for itself. It is not abandoning its deep partnership with Tehran, but it is carefully positioning itself as a player that can speak to everyone. This strategy is not without risks. The Middle East is full of traps, and one misstep could damage China's carefully built image. But if Beijing succeeds, it could redefine global diplomacy in the region. The message would be clear: the world no longer depends only on Washington to shape peace. For viewers around the world, this is a reminder that power does not always show itself with armies or weapons. Sometimes it shows itself quietly through handshakes, agreements, and the patient building of trust. And right now, China is playing that game in the Middle East, while most of the world is too distracted to notice.